The string quartet stopped. 800 faces turned. I felt the cold trickle of ice water sliding down my collar before my brain caught up with what had just happened. The crystal tumbler was still in his hand, dripping, his knuckles white around it. My son-in-law's father, Edmund Ashcroft III, standing 6 inches from my face in his $15,000 tuxedo, his cheeks blotched with that particular shade of red that old money reserves for people it considers beneath the carpet. "Get out," he hissed, "before I have you removed by security." I didn't move. I just stood there in my off-the-rack JCPenney suit, the one I'd bought in Akron, 40 miles from the rental cabin where I'd spent the last week trying to talk myself into showing up, and I watched the water bead on the lapel and drop onto the polished oak parquet of the Greenbrier hotel ballroom. My daughter Margaret was 12 feet behind him. White silk Vera Wang. Pearls I'd never seen before. She was looking at the floor. "Honey," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. "Maggie, sweetheart, look at me." She didn't look up. The young man beside her, my new son-in-law, Sutherland Ashcroft IV, had his hand on her elbow like he was guiding a horse. He whispered something into her ear. She nodded, and then she said it, loud enough that the front 3 tables heard her, and the cellist in the back probably heard her too, because the acoustics in that ballroom were built to carry a whisper to the chandeliers. "He's not really my father. He's just the man who raised me. We barely speak anymore." 800 faces, 800. I'd been counting them when I walked in, the way I count things when I'm nervous, the way I've counted things since Korea. 800 people in pearls and tailored gowns and patent leather, and my own daughter standing there in the dress I had not paid for, at the wedding I had not been invited to plan, telling a room of strangers from West Virginia and Washington and New York that the man bleeding ice water onto his cheap suit was nobody to her. I wiped my face with the pocket square I'd ironed that morning at the cabin. The fabric came away cold and damp. I folded it once, twice, and tucked it back into my breast pocket. I looked at Edmund Ashcroft III, who was waiting for me to crumble or to swing. I did neither. "Sir," I said, "are you absolutely certain about what you just did?" He laughed. Actually laughed. A big braying sound that bounced off the gold leaf and the imported French wallpaper, and behind him a few of his crowd laughed too, the nervous, loyalist laugh that men of his sort always get from the people who depend on them. "Certain?" he said. "Old man, I have been certain about every decision I have ever made. Walk out of here with your dignity. What little remains before I have it taken from you in writing." I nodded slowly. I looked past him at Maggie one more time. She still wouldn't lift her eyes. I turned and I walked out of the Greenbrier ballroom. Past the ice sculptures shaped like swans. Past the table where the place cards spelled out names I didn't recognize. Past the doorman who had eyed my suit when I came in and who now made a point of looking somewhere else entirely. I walked down the long carpeted hallway and I stepped out into the September evening in White Sulphur Springs, and I stood in the parking lot next to my 2009 Ford F-150 with 318,000 miles on it, and I breathed. The truck started on the first try. It always did. I kept it tuned the way a man keeps a good rifle. I drove out the long, winding access road of that resort, with the Allegheny Mountains stitched purple against the dusk, and somewhere around mile 7, I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, put the truck in park, and laid my forehead on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I haven't cried since 1987, when Eloise died of the pancreatic cancer that took her in 11 weeks from diagnosis. I'd promised her on the last night, sitting in that hospice chair holding her hand that was nothing but bones by then, that I would raise our girl and that I would do it right. I'd done my best. God knows I had done my best. I sat there until the sky turned the color of an old bruise. Then I drove back to the cabin, and I took out my phone, the cheap flip phone I carry, because I don't like the smart ones, and I dialed the only number I have memorized besides my daughter's, which she'd changed 2 years ago without telling me. "Sterling," I said when he picked up. "It's me." There was a long pause on the other end. "Sir," he said, "it's almost 11 at night. I know what time it is, Sterling. I want you to fly into Lewisburg tomorrow morning. Bring the full team. Bring Patrice and Vaughn and the kid from Yale. What's his name? The one with the glasses? Colson. That's him. Bring Collison, too. I'm at the Whispering Pines cabin on Anthony Creek Road. You can pick up a car at the airport. It's a 30-minute drive. Another pause. Longer this time. Sir, Sterling said, I have to ask, are we activating? I looked out the cabin window. The moon was up. The pines were silver. Somewhere far off an owl was calling. Yes, I said, we are. I should explain something here, because if you're listening to this and you're picturing me as some retired truck driver or a hardware store owner from rural Ohio, you're picturing what I have spent the last 36 years cultivating. The work boots, the flannel, the truck, the cabin without internet, the flip phone. It is all real and it is all chosen. I grew up dirt poor in Wheeling. My father worked the steel mills and died of black lung at 53. I went to Vietnam because the alternative was waiting for the draft, and I came back with a Bronze Star and a degree on the GI Bill from Ohio State, and then I had the kind of luck that a man only gets once in his life. In 1981, I figured out something about the way regional banks were going to consolidate over the coming 20 years that other people had not yet figured out. By 1989, when Eloise got sick, I had built and sold 3 institutions, and the proceeds had been quietly invested in a portfolio that, as of last Thursday, was worth a number I do not say out loud because saying it out loud tends to change the way people look at you. Eloise had never wanted any of it to touch Margaret. We had agreed. We had sworn to each other in that hospice room. Our girl would grow up the way we had grown up, knowing the value of $1, knowing what work was, knowing that the man who put her cereal on the table in the morning was a man who got up early and came home tired. I would not raise a princess. I would raise a person. So I bought a brick split level in a working-class township outside Columbus. I drove the F-150. I worked, on paper, as a regional supervisor for a mid-size industrial parts distributor that I'd also quietly owned since 1996. I went to the Friday night football games. I sat through the dance recitals. I helped with the algebra homework. And when Margaret got into Princeton, I paid for it in cash from an account she never knew existed, and I told her it was financial aid and a small inheritance from her mother. She never asked questions. She never had to. I had built a life that did not invite them. She had stopped calling me in 2022, after she met Sutherland at a fundraiser in Manhattan, where she was working in marketing for a firm that I had, 2 years earlier, anonymously become the largest shareholder of without telling her, after his family began to ask questions about her people. After she began, slowly at first and then all at once, to be ashamed, I had let it happen. That was my mistake. I had thought she would come back to herself. I had thought the values I'd spent 28 years pouring into her were too deep to wash out. I was wrong. Sterling arrived the next morning at 7:30 with 3 black sedans and a folder 8 inches thick. Patrice, my chief counsel for 22 years. Vaughn, my head of forensic accounting. The kid Collison, who I'd hired out of Yale Law 2 summers ago and who reminded me of myself at that age in ways I did not entirely like, and 4 others I had not asked for, but whom Sterling, who has been with me since 1991 and who knows my moods better than I do, had brought anyway. We sat around the pine table in the cabin's small kitchen. I poured coffee. I told them what had happened. When I was done, the kid Collison was the first to speak. "Sir," he said, "are we sure about this? She's your daughter." I looked at him. He was 28 years old. He had the kind of face that hadn't yet been disappointed by anybody. "Son," I said, "we are not here for my daughter. We are here for her father-in-law, the man who put his hands on me in front of 800 people, the man who taught my daughter, through his money and his approval and his condescension, that the man who fed her was a thing to be embarrassed about. We are here to make him understand exactly what he did last night." Patrice opened the folder. "The Ashcroft family business," she said, "is Ashcroft Federal Holdings. Coal, primarily. Some natural gas. They own the third largest privately held mining concern in the Appalachian Basin, headquartered in Charleston. Family wealth estimated at $420 million. Edmund Ashcroft III inherited from his father in 2001. He has expanded the holdings, but he has also leveraged them aggressively. The company carries debt of approximately $190 million across 3 primary credit facilities. Vaughn slid a page across to me. I read it. "Who holds the senior debt?" I asked. "2 banks," he said. Mountain Heritage Capital out of Charleston, and First Allegheny. I almost smiled. The dark thing that lives in a man's chest when he has been struck publicly and unjustly almost smiled. "And who," I said, "owns Mountain Heritage Capital?" Vaughn waited a beat, because Vaughn likes a moment, the way old accountants do. "You do, sir, through the Ridgepoint Trust, acquired in 2017. The Ashcroft family has no idea." I nodded. I looked out the window at the morning fog rising off Anthony Creek. "And the son?" I said. "Sutherland IV, my new son-in-law." The kid Collison cleared his throat. "He has problems, sir." "What kind of problems?" "Gambling. We've been tracking him for 6 months, since the engagement was announced. He has lost approximately $840,000 in private high-stakes poker games in Atlantic City and Las Vegas over the past 2 years. He owes a man named Frankie De Palma about $210,000. De Palma is connected to people who, while not the kind of people who break legs in 2026, are absolutely the kind of people who file civil suits and ruin reputations. How is he funding this?" Collison glanced at Patrice. Patrice nodded. "His father's company, sir. He has been moving funds through 3 shell entities in Delaware. We estimate he has skimmed approximately $1.3 million from Ashcroft Federal in the past 18 months. His father does not know." I sat back in the chair. I drank my coffee. It had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. "And my daughter?" I said. Sterling answered this one himself. "She doesn't know about any of it, sir. Not the gambling. Not the skimming. She believes she has married a young man with a trust fund and a future." I closed my eyes. I thought about Maggie at 6 years old, in pigtails, missing a front tooth, holding up a drawing of our family to show me. 3 stick figures. Me, Eloise, and her. A yellow sun in the corner. She'd written underneath, in her careful first-grade letters, "My dad works hard." I thought about Maggie at 14, the year after she'd come back from a sleepover at a friend's bigger house, and asked me, quiet, embarrassed, why we couldn't afford a vacation. I had told her the truth as I had constructed it, that we did fine, that we had what we needed, that a vacation wasn't a thing we did, but that someday when she was grown, she could take any vacation she liked. I thought about Maggie at 22 in a Princeton commencement gown, hugging me, smelling like the cheap perfume she'd worn since high school, telling me she loved me. And then I thought about Maggie at 31 in white silk, looking at the floor. "All right," I said, "here is what we are going to do." I laid it out for them over the next 2 hours. It was not complicated. The best plans never are. The Ashcroft family was leveraged. The leverage was held by an institution they did not know I owned. The institution was within its rights to review the terms of those credit facilities at any time and to require additional collateral in response to material adverse changes. Material adverse changes can be many things. The discovery of fraudulent activity by a family member at a senior level of the borrower's operations would certainly qualify. The fraudulent activity, which had been documented by my people for the past 6 months, would be quietly forwarded to the appropriate authorities, not by me, through a nonprofit watchdog group in Charleston that I had been a discreet patron of for 9 years, which would receive the documents from an anonymous source and would, in the normal course of its work, refer them to the West Virginia Attorney General. The Ashcroft family would discover, in roughly that order, that their son was being investigated for embezzlement, that their company's debt was being called, and that their reputation in the small and gossipy world of Appalachian old money was being torn down by the very newspapers that had carried the wedding announcement 2 days earlier. I would do none of these things. They would happen, inevitably. because of choices the Ashcrofts themselves had made. I would simply remove the small, invisible cushion of my benevolent ignorance that had, until last night, allowed those choices to remain consequence-free. Patrice took notes. Vaughn made calls. The kid Collison, to his credit, did not flinch. "Sir," he said when the others had stepped outside. "May I ask one thing?" "Go ahead, son. Your daughter. When this is over, what happens to her?" I looked at him for a long moment. "That depends on her." I looked at him for a long moment. "That depends on her," I said, entirely. The first call came 11 days later. It was a Tuesday. I was at the cabin, splitting wood for the stove, when my flip phone buzzed against the hip pocket of my jeans. I did not recognize the number. I almost didn't answer it. "Dad?" Her voice. Maggie's voice, smaller than I had heard it since she was a teenager. I sat down on the stump I'd been using as a chopping block. I held the phone with both hands. "Yes, sweetheart." "Dad, She broke off. There was a sound that might have been crying or might have been a bad connection. "Dad, something is happening to Sutherland's family. Something terrible. There are people, there are investigators, there's the bank. Edmund Dad, please, can we talk?" I closed my eyes. I thought about Eloise. I thought about every promise I had made. "What do you need, Maggie?" "I need to come home." I let the silence stretch. The fall wind moved through the pines. Somewhere a hawk was calling. "Sweetheart," I said. "Where is home exactly?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she said. She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know anymore. You told 800 people I was not your father. Dad, you told them I was the man who raised you. You told them we barely speak. You stood there in a dress that cost more than my truck, and you let a man you had known for 2 days throw water in my face, and you said nothing. Maggie, Margaret, look at me. Look at what you did. I am not asking. I am telling. Look at what you did. I am not asking. I am telling. Look at it." She was crying now. I knew the sound of my daughter crying. I had known it since she was 3 days old, and always was too exhausted to get out of bed, and I had walked the hallway with her at 3 in the morning, singing the only song I knew all the words to, which was an old Hank Williams song my own father used to sing me. "Daddy," she said, "Daddy, I am so sorry. I know you are, sweetheart. Can you help me? Can you make it stop? Sutherland says, he says you're, that nobody but somebody powerful would be able to. Dad, do you know anyone?" And there it was, the thing I had been waiting for, the thing I had hoped, against the entire weight of the evidence, would not come. She was not calling because she had seen me. She was calling because Sutherland had told her that the man she had married was being destroyed, and she had remembered, vaguely, in some dusty corner of her mind, that her father had a kind of strange, small competence about him. A regional supervisor. A man who knew people. She was calling to see if the regional supervisor could pull a string. I felt something close in my chest like a door. "Maggie," I said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" "Yes. I am not going to help your husband. I am not going to help your husband. I am not going to help his father. They are facing the consequences of things they have done themselves, and those consequences are not mine to lift. Do you understand?" "But Dad," and I want you to understand something else, sweetheart. "Because I love you. I have loved you every day of your life. I loved you when you were 4 and you climbed into my lap during your mother's funeral and asked me when she was coming back. I loved you when you broke your arm falling off the swing in the 3rd grade, and I sat with you in the emergency room until 2 in the morning. I loved you the day I drove you to Princeton with your boxes in the back of this same truck, and I watched you walk into that dormitory without looking back. I have loved you, Maggie, every single day. Daddy, please, but you, sweetheart, did not love me. Not the way I needed you to. Not when it mattered, and I have to live with that. I am going to. But I am going to live with it from a distance, do you understand?" She was sobbing. "I am going to do one thing for you. I said. One thing, and then you are not going to call me again for a long time. Maybe ever. That part will be up to you, and it will be up to a great deal of work on yourself, the kind of work I cannot do for you. What, Daddy, what? I am going to wire you $20,000 on Monday morning. To the checking account you opened in college, which I assume is still open. That money is so you can leave him. Not save him, leave him. Get an attorney, get an apartment, get a therapist in that order. The marriage you are in is going to fall apart in the next 60 days whether you participate in that or not. I am giving you a chance to participate in it with some dignity. I waited. Do you understand me, Maggie? Yes, Daddy. Good. One more thing. When you are 40 or 50 or 60 and you have done the work and you have become a person you can live with, if you want to find me, you can. I will be here. Probably here at the cabin. Probably splitting the same wood. And you can sit down across the same table and we can talk. But you will have to come find me. I am done coming to you. She cried for a long time. I sat on that stump and I let her. When she had cried herself out, I told her I loved her and I hung up. The Ashcroft situation unfolded over the next 4 months exactly the way Patrice and Vaughn had laid out. Sutherland IV was indicted in early December on 12 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He took a plea in February for 38 months in a federal minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Edmund III, faced with a debt call he could not meet, sold 60% of Ashcroft Federal Holdings to a Delaware LLC, which was eventually traced by an enterprising reporter at the Charleston Gazette-Mail to a trust based out of the Cayman Islands. The trust was mine. The reporter never figured that out. The Ashcrofts moved to a smaller estate in North Carolina. The Greenbrier wedding photos were quietly removed from the society pages of 3 regional magazines. Maggie filed for divorce on October 16th. The $20,000 was waiting in her account on the Monday after our call. She used it the way I'd hoped. Attorney, apartment, therapist. She moved to Asheville. She got a job at a small marketing firm there that I do not own and have made certain to never own. She has not called me since that October afternoon, except once, on Christmas morning, when she left a voicemail that said only, "Daddy, I am working on it. I love you. I am working on it." I saved the voicemail. I have listened to it once. I am sitting in the cabin tonight. The same one. It is May now, almost 20 months since the wedding, and the dogwoods on the slope behind the woodshed are in bloom. There is a deer in the meadow at the bottom of the property. The Allegheny Mountains, when the light goes, turn that exact shade of purple again. I am 71 years old. I have more money than any one human being should be permitted to have. I have one daughter, and I do not know if I will see her again before I die, and I have made my peace with that being a thing that is largely up to her. I learned something at that wedding that I should have learned 40 years earlier, when my own father, on his deathbed in that Milltown hospital in Wheeling, looked up at me from the pillow and said, "Son, the only inheritance worth a damn is character, and you cannot give it to somebody. They have to take it." I tried to give it to my girl. I poured everything I had into the giving. But she had to take it, and somewhere along the road she set it down and walked away from it, and she chose instead the inheritance you can write a check for. Maybe she will come back for it someday. Maybe she will not. In the meantime, I split wood. I read in the evenings. I take Sterling's calls when there's something that needs deciding. I watch the deer in the meadow. I think about Elby's. And every now and again, when the wind is right and the night is quiet, I take out the pocket square I wore to that wedding, the one I folded back into my breast pocket after Edmund Ashcroft III emptied his glass into my face, and I look at the faint water stain that never quite washed out, and I remember what it cost me and what I learned and what I refused to bow down to. Then I fold it back up, and I put it away, and I go to sleep. I've thought about that night at the Greenbrier almost every morning since. I split the wood, I drink the coffee, I look at the dogwoods on the slope, and I turn the thing over in my hands like a stone I picked up off a creek bed. The cause was never the glass of water. The water was the result. The cause went back 20 years, to small moments I missed and softer choices I made. The cause was that I believed Maggie would absorb my values the way a child absorbs sunlight, just by standing near it. I forgot that a person also has to choose. I forgot that you can hand somebody the inheritance of a decent character and they can still set it down on the counter and walk out the door. Edmund Ashcroft III emptied that crystal tumbler because he had been raised his whole life to believe that money was the measure of a man, and Sutherland IV stole from his own father because he had been raised to believe the same. And Maggie looked at the floor because somewhere along the road, in a marketing job in Manhattan, and a fundraiser she should never have gone to, she had begun to believe it too. Each of them was simply the consequence of what had been planted in them. So I have come to believe, sitting on this porch at 71 years old, that the only thing worth pouring into a child is 3 things, and you have to pour all 3. You pour in the bone of right and wrong, the part that knows when to stand and when to walk away, the part that does not bend even when 800 people are watching. You pour in the thinking part, the curiosity, the willingness to ask hard questions about your own life and not flinch from the answers. And you pour in the spine, the willingness to do hard things when hard things are required, to split your own wood, to fight your own fights, to feel humiliation and stand back up anyway and finish your sentence. Maggie got the first 2 from me and from her mother. She did not, I think now, ever fully get the third. We made her life too soft in the ways that mattered. We thought we were protecting her. We were thinning her. If you are listening to this and you have a child still young, pour all 3. Pour them every day. Do not skip the spine because you love them. The spine is the love. And if you are listening to this and your child is grown and gone, like mine, sit with the result. Do not try to fix what is no longer yours to fix. Live your life clean. Split your wood. Be findable when the time comes. That is all any of us can do.